Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first of a series of conversations we're going to be having today on live about the judicial races happening in Pennsylvania and the impacts and the importance of Pennsylvania courts. We are joined this morning for our first interview with Deborah Klehr, who is the executive director of the Education Law Center here in Philadelphia, a longtime advocate for children and families in Pennsylvania's Pennsylvania school systems. I shouldn't say just public school systems. I'm sorry. And welcome, Deborah. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So first important question is, have you voted today? And if not, what is your plan to vote? Oh, we see the sticker now. Okay, it's covered up by your name tag.
I voted, yes, at around 7 a.m. I think I was voter 15. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, busy morning there.
Come out to vote.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad you did that. I was just saying I will not be able to get out until lunchtime because we have a series of these interviews this morning. So I'll have my I voted sticker for the afternoon at least. But for our friends who are tuning in today who may not be familiar with the Education Law Center, who don't have a dad who was a school superintendent who grew up talking about the Education Law Center all the time, can you tell us a little bit about the organization and the work that you're doing, like broadly speaking, to help children and families in Pennsylvania?
Yes. The Education Law Center is a nonprofit legal advocacy organization, and our mission is to ensure all children in Pennsylvania have access to quality public education. And we do our work focused on underserved student populations. So students in poverty, students of color, students with disabilities, multilingual learners, students in the foster care and juvenile justice systems, LGBTQ youth, students experiencing homelessness, and students at the intersection of these identities who, through no fault of their own, face barriers to accessing education. And we do our work through multiple strategies. We do work through direct representation. We operate a helpline. About 1,000 families and child-serving professionals call us every year with questions. We do impact litigation. So when we see a pattern through our helpline and we see a big issue that we want to address, we will maybe file something more systemic through impact litigation. We do policy advocacy at the local, state, and federal levels, community engagement, doing trainings and listening sessions with partners throughout Pennsylvania, and strategic communication. So we just issued this fall our back to school guide for the 2025-2026 school year, which has about 100 publications in it, including many translated into other languages to help families and child-serving professionals understand their rights.
Amazing. As we're talking, I'm thinking at Community 70, one of our marquee projects is this How Philly Works guide. We're about to publish our How Awards Work guide, but the next one in the series is How the School District Works. And I'm thinking we should probably include that helpline. It's very, very Philadelphia specific, but we should include that helpline in that guide because it's designed to help families, navigate these complex systems, and sometimes they need help. So we'll make sure to include that in that guide. So thank you so much for the work that you do and for being here this morning. I would love to talk a little bit about the Commonwealth Court because I know your organization is well versed in Commonwealth Court. We've been talking a lot about judicial elections, and the Commonwealth Court is probably the least well understood court as we go through this. And the case I keep going to is the school funding case because it's the perfect, from my perspective, you may agree, example of like the impact of this court on the public. So you're involved in that work. Can you talk to us about Ed Law Center's role in the school funding lawsuit and the work that you've done, and sort of talk about that case, maybe kind of walk people through it if you have time?
Sure. Well, I started at the Education Law Center 20 years ago. Obviously, I was 7 years old.
I was going to say you were very young then.
I was a younger attorney, yes. And when I started, one of the top issues that we were focused on at the Education Law Center was fair funding. And it still remains one of the top issues that we're focused on at the Education Law Center, because so many of our students in so many school districts throughout the Commonwealth, it's not just Philadelphia, it's really rural, urban, and suburban school districts in all parts of Pennsylvania suffer because of the way the state funds or does not fund public education. And so across the country, the way schools are funded are through a combination of federal, state, and local dollars. And while the federal dollars are important, and what's happening right now at the federal level, um, is very harmful to school districts across the country if they were to lose those federal dollars. The truth is that much of that funding actually comes from a combination of state and local share. And in more progressive states, most of the funding comes from the state and a lesser amount from the local school district. But here in Pennsylvania, for many, many years, we have had a formula in place that is overly reliant on local share. And so if you are in a school district that's very wealthy, you can raise local dollars to fund the schools. And the fact that the state isn't really doing its job, like, may not have as big of an impact. But for most school districts in Pennsylvania, they have maybe a high tax effort, but low tax capacity. They cannot raise the dollars locally to fund their schools. And that is exacerbated by the fact that the state isn't paying what it needs to pay to adequately and equitably fund our school districts. And
Can
so
I
that,
ask a quick question?
yeah.
Just because people, I mean, the idea that like they have a high tax effort but low tax capacity. Can you give like what does that look like? Is that just a community that's impoverished, or what impacts that directly?
So William Penn Area School District is a local school district here in Delaware County, not far from Philadelphia,
Yep.
and one of our named plaintiff school districts in the case. They tax themselves at a very high rate, but property values aren't high enough meaning that it doesn't generate as many dollars.
Perfect.
Nearby school districts like Radnor or Lower Merion may tax themselves at a much lower rate percentage wise, but it raises many more dollars because the property values are higher. The reality for many school districts throughout Pennsylvania is that they are putting in local effort, but they just can't raise the dollars locally. And they shouldn't have to, because the state should be paying its fair share.
Right.
But what's happened over many decades is that state share has gone down. And so we see growing gaps and equity gaps between what school districts have, and growing adequacy gaps between what districts have and what they need just to provide a basic education to their students. And so this was an issue that predates my time at the Education Law Center, but has really been a focus of the work I've done here over the past 20 years, to sort of recognize that the state needs to adequately and equitably fund our schools. The state constitution in Pennsylvania says, in what we refer to as the education clause, that the General Assembly, that's our legislature, shall support and maintain a thorough and efficient system of public education to meet the needs of the Commonwealth. And to fast forward, part of the, we filed the case and now have a court decision to interpret what that thorough and efficient clause means, the education clause. But in any case, we were aware of the deep underfunding and the deep inequities throughout Pennsylvania, not only through the data, which we had, of course, but through the individual cases that we were handling through our helpline of students and families calling us and telling us about the realities of what was happening in their school districts. And so we knew directly from families about the child who needed to sit in a specific spot in school so that she wouldn't get dripped on from the ceiling leaking, or that, one particular teacher in a school district brought blankets to the students because the HVAC was so old that the rooms were freezing in the winter. So we knew about these issues, and we knew from many, many other lawsuits in other states that a successful way to get the legislature to adequately fund schools was through bringing a lawsuit under the state constitution. And that had happened in many other states and had not been successful here in Pennsylvania.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Because like the education clause has been in Pennsylvania Constitution, maybe not from the first round of it, but for a very, very long time. This issue came up before the courts historically a couple of times. And I think the Supreme Court kind of said, basically it's none of our business. And then we have the William Penn case that eventually gets us to the decision in 2023. So that case, what was the path, right? It started in Commonwealth Court.
So we brought the case in 2014.
Right.
Education Law Center, along with Public Interest Law Center and a private law firm called O'Melveny, which did this case pro bono with us, which is incredible. And so these three legal organizations brought the case on behalf of 6 school districts throughout Pennsylvania, rural, urban, suburban, geographically diverse, parents of students in school districts across Pennsylvania, and 2 statewide organizations, the Pennsylvania Association of Rural and Small Schools and the NAACP Pennsylvania Conference. And this is an issue. This underfunding is an issue that impacts students all across Pennsylvania, rural, urban, suburban. And we filed the case in 2014. And when we filed the case, Commonwealth Court said, we brought the case in Commonwealth Court, and they said, well, this case, because of precedent here, is not justiciable, is not the state constitution's education clause and equal protection provisions is not something that we're going to get into. We took that to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and in 2017, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, yes, this is justiciable, go have a trial. And so we did. And in 2021 and 2022, we had a 4-month trial in Commonwealth Court in Harrisburg, with many witnesses to make the case that the way the state funds public education in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional under both the equal protection provisions and the education clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution. And then in February 2023, Commonwealth Court ruled that, in fact, the way the state funds public education is unconstitutional and ordered the state to fix it.
So you solved the problem. It's all corrected now. It's all done, right?
Done. Well, not yet. We're on a path towards changing the trajectory for generations of students in Pennsylvania, but it is dependent on implementing a remedy that actually changes the way we fund public schools. And so while we, this is an incredibly important case, and I'll add that it was not appealed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And so this decision in Commonwealth Court from 2023 is final. And it lays out why the way the state funds education is unconstitutional and orders the state to fix it. And that's where we are right now. As you know, the state is now over 4 months late in passing a budget for this year, which impacts a lot of things beyond public education, but certainly impacts public education because school districts haven't been paid by the state since July, now November. And that's not something school districts can afford. And so we are seeing the impact of that in school districts, again, throughout Pennsylvania, rural, urban, and suburban school districts suffering because they don't have the funds they need. They will get the funds, the state will pass a budget, I believe.
Hopefully.
And we're hopeful that it will continue on a path towards constitutional compliance by allocating dollars to an adequacy line item to make up for the huge gap over $4 billion left in between what the schools have and what they need to just provide an adequate education.
So since the court made the decision, have there been increased investments in that adequacy funding line?
Yes. So after that decision, first there was a basic education funding commission made up of members from the governor's office, the House and the Senate in Pennsylvania to come up with a path forward. In July 2024, the legislature, bipartisan legislature, passed legislation acknowledging a $4.5 billion adequacy gap that the state was responsible for filling, and allocated $500 million towards that $4.5 billion. So that was last year. And we are hopeful that the legislature will again allocate money both through the adequacy line item, but also through the other ways that we get dollars to school districts: basic education funding, special education funding, pre-K funding, facilities funding. There are a lot of line items that the school districts need to operate schools and provide quality public education for our students. So while the court played an incredibly crucial and important role in addressing the unconstitutional funding system, the next step is now the legislature focusing on how to fix that, how to implement a remedy.
One of the things we've been tracking at 70 through our newsletter and other things is this budget gap issue. And I'm sure you saw, but just so the public knows, William Penn School District, which is one of the named plaintiffs in this case, they announced that if a state budget is not passed in January, they will actually close the school district at the end of January. So that are the stakes that these districts they're not sitting on piles of cash, so they can just manage this forever. So we need the legislature to enact a budget, and we need the legislature to continue to follow the court order to increase that investment. Recognizing $4.5 billion doesn't show up overnight out of nowhere. So we need to continue on that road towards adequacy. So thank you so much for joining us. We are quickly running out of time. How can our members, people who are watching this video, stay up to date with the work of your organization? What's the best way to do that?
Well, if you go to our website, www.elc-pa.org, you could sign up for our newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter, and in addition, we send out e-blasts when emergency things arise. And also welcome you to get involved in our work, follow our work. We do know your rights trainings very regularly. There are a lot of ways to get involved in public education, both through the Education Law Center, but through your child's school district, through getting involved. And remember, today we're not only voting in judicial elections, but depending on where you live, also school board elections, which are also critical way, they have impact on education at the local level. So there are a lot of ways that you can get involved, both with the Education Law Center, but also with public education advocacy more broadly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. And we really encourage everyone, one, to get out and vote. It's early. You have all day today, so please get to the polls. You can help shape decisions on court level, get a good sticker. And also those the school board races are so important. We don't have an elected school board in Philadelphia, but all of the regions around us are voting for school boards today. So please pay attention and get out there and vote, because it will impact your children and the future of your community.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Here.